We do know a lot of you, but you might not know us. So let us introduce ourselves. I am Nita Kerman-Skilson, the co-founder and co-executive director of Produce Good.
And I'm Alex Wyatt, also co-founder and co-executive director of Produce Good. So great to have everybody here together.
Thank you all. So just to get started, we came from a wonderful session before lunch that had everything to do with collaboration. And the takeaway from that was so powerful. It was basically talking about looking at outcome rather than output. Like, how do we measure the good that we're doing? And that's why we're here today, because many of us are working every day very diligently, doing our jobs as a food recovery organization and many others. Every day you're just doing the thing that you need to do. You're trying your best. You're getting all the things done that you need, get people's food out, get it distributed. But really what we're here to find out is who you are and how can we work together and really get to what is going to benefit our community rather than just a bunch of numbers. And we don't know exactly how to measure that, but we want to really explore that a lot because it's so important for us to really know that people are working with people and we're just trying to move this together. And it's very, very hard sometimes when you're in that space, especially the nonprofit space, to really understand what it is that you're really trying to do and who are all of these people and your partners. So, we, as organizations, we do have the power to change our community, to change the communities that we're in, and that's why we're here today also. And, again, this session, the tagline is basically we want to be cultivating solidarity, not charity. This is not a, giving from one to, from higher to lower. We want to understand how we can all help each other. So that said, we do want to break the barriers a little, and we hope today that we can do that. So moving now to introducing our wonderful panel that is going to help us do that. I'm going to pass the microphone, and can you introduce yourselves, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Imani Marshall Moreno. I am a lead organizer at March for Black Women San Diego. And March for Black Women San Diego is a grassroots organization that works for the wellness and the justice of Black women and femmes in San Diego County. During the height of the pandemic, and we've continued the work now, we started a mutual aid network called Black Women Deserve. And so I'm really excited to talk about mutual aid and the food system with y'all today. And yeah, that's it. That's me.
Hi, I am Claudia Montenegro. I am the founder of Porchlight Community Services. We are a food rescue organization that serves in a dignified, holistic, client-centered food pantry. It's client choice. We serve everyone in San Diego. We partner with a lot and support a lot of the grassroots organizations in San Diego County. We've been operating since 2017. We operate out of Kearny Mesa. We serve mostly Linda Vista, Claremont Bay Park. We serve individuals and families that suffer from autoimmune disease issues or also are not qualifying for government assistance. So, thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Zink, and I'm with Bayside Community Center. We're in Linda Vista. We're a 91-year-old nonprofit, many years, right? Pretty good in San Diego. And pretty much our mission really kind of describes what we do. Our mission is to improve our community, our diverse community, through to have a better quality of life through education, advocacy, and social services. My position with Bayside is I'm the program manager for our Environmental Learning Center, and I wear many hats. Program design, I'm an urban farmer, I'm a horticultural therapist, and a garden educator. So that's me. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tomasa, and I work at Bayside Community Center as a community advocate for the Spanish-speaking and the urban farmers. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not used to speak in front of that many people. This is my first time.
You're doing great, Tomasa. Amazing. So before we get going on our end, we had a couple things we wanted to ask you all. So I'm going to hand over to Alex our first question.
So we had this idea when we were talking about food recovery and the food system to maybe go out to the audience and ask all of you, how would you define food recovery? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to your organization? Thinking about mutual aid, not thinking about mutual aid, solidarity. From our perspective, Produce Good, we're out there finding different sources of food excess and trying to get that to organizations who have come to us and said, hey, we need some fresh produce. So we're looking to make a match between those organizations who are serving clients who are needing fresh produce and the sources of fresh produce that we find. For our own definition, it's very important to us that we're giving the organizations we're providing the food to amounts that they have the capacity to take in. We've never wanted to overwhelm, so we're always trying to match for capacity. We're trying to go further with that, though. We ourselves, we want to understand how you might define food recovery, and we want to start with some of those definitions. Is there anyone who wants to comment?
Yeah, I think food recovery that I'm interested in is keeping edible food out of the landfill and from keeping it from making methane and being able to feed people.
Hi, Rodrigo with the International Community Foundation. Food recovery, there's a hierarchy established by the EPA. And so first it's reduce at the source, then it's feed people, then animals, then industrial usage, and then composting, and then landfill. So going down that stream to make sure that we're utilizing all of the resources accurately or to the most possible, to the most extent.
Thank you. Do we maybe have one more? These are all so amazing.
I'm Mandy Connery with The Radical Beat. I work more in the restaurant industry, completely actually. I own a restaurant, and restaurants are pretty notorious for food waste. But what I found is, one, in composting, but two, through mutual aid efforts, is that a lot of times food doesn't have a way to be prepped. So it's like, how do we, like in our case, after the shift, after the week or sauces that are left over, what can we make that is just like easily accessible for people to eat, especially people that are food insecure, like our unhoused neighbors. So that's how I view it.
Thank you.
My name is Sundarajan Mutialu. My nickname is Sun. Food recovery for me is that we've normalized eating empty food. Not all of us can go to Whole Foods or places and have organic because it's extremely expensive. So we've been relegated to treat the symptoms and not the cause of our illnesses, and then supplement by going out and having doctors. And where doctors would then say, buy a supplement of D and A. We used to get that from the food. We used to get that from the plant. And the places that are disenfranchised from that are worse off because they get second and third generation food. And I think food recovery should start with the source, where the plants are, how they're grown, make sure that you get all of the compound secondary metabolites and such before you talk about how to get the distribution going and where. So it's got to be high quality food.
Yeah, I would say adding on to a lot of the definitions I've heard today in the room, I think additionally it's also redefining what waste is, right? And I think a lot of times there can be some clues on how to redefine that, from getting in touch and respecting indigenous cultures, so the cultures that are indigenous to these lands, as well as wherever lands that your ancestors may come from if you're not indigenous to these lands. So I think it's really about, we're going to talk about this a lot today when we're talking about what solidarity is, but I think we really need to look at how this system was set up, recognize that it's a system, like the food system is built on violence and exploitation, in this country and around the world, and really start to question all the assumptions that kind of placate us as we live under this system that it exploits people, right? We could not have the agricultural system that we have today without the genocide of our indigenous loved ones. And now today, people on reservations are paying astronomically high prices for food. And that's the system, the food system that we are participating in. So I think we need to really start questioning a lot of these assumptions. And I think for food recovery, that big question is, what is waste?
Food recovery for us means utilizing everything that is out there, educating the public as well as our donors on what can be consumed safely by a human versus what can be composted. Diverting food waste or wasted food are missed opportunities for us to address food security. Also, food recovery or food rescue also involves diverting waste from our landfills and accepting, acknowledging the impact of, one, to grow the food, all the labor, all of the resources, water, effort, what we're putting into our farming practices, regenerative, farming, what's going in our bodies. It's just a myriad of a lot of impacts that we have to acknowledge just in producing the food. And then at a certain point, we turn around and how are we going to give it to, the people that could benefit the most from it? And what is our responsibility in regards to, once we have it, how can we address and meet the needs of different cultures, respect, religious and ethnic preferences. So it means a lot of things for different people. We're a community-based organization. We utilize, I would say, 90% of everything that we rescue. We convert some of our food rescues into new byproducts. We have invested in dehydrators, in juicing machines to utilize and implement our 75-25% policy of when we receive a donation, we scan through just about every single piece of produce that crosses our hands, and we utilize every single piece that we get, whether it's creating juice or creating new herbs and spices to extend the shelf life. And we circle it right back out to, different, individuals that come and visit our pantry. We also partner with a lot of mutual aid groups that are doing the grassroots work out all throughout San Diego County. We also utilize a lot of education. I think the biggest misstep in a lot of the food recovery process is educating the public on what exactly is safe to eat, teaching people about labels, expiration dates, just general ways of kind of extending the shelf life of even at home practices, what can end up in a compost versus what you can use. I'll explain a little bit of the process for our juicing methodology is whenever we rescue excess produce, we utilize and we distribute it first to humans, and what isn't edible for humans, we cut out whatever isn't used. We turn it either into a dehydrated byproduct or we create juices with it. So the extract of the pulp from the juices, we also create into a new product, which lately has been puppy or dog food. So we're resourceful in that sense. We're able to extend the shelf life, and I would say out of the 3,000 pounds that we can rescue on a given day, maybe 30 or 40 pounds of it ends up in a landfill, because the next level for us is we partner with different animal sanctuaries that accept some of the stuff that isn't deemed for consumption, and it's just going to be too labor intensive for us to convert it into a new byproduct. So we use just about everything that crosses our door.
Wow, that's amazing. Now I have to go next. Great work. Food recovery to me is just kind of working locally with your partners, or even neighbors, people in your community, gathering what food you can and giving it to the people and sharing it with people who need it, but then also just educating about where it came from, how you can produce some of your own food, and then just even just simple things for me is just, for example, we collaborate with Produce Good, and they send us amazing oranges for our food distribution. But even some of our volunteers, we're so conditioned that the fruit or vegetable has to look exactly perfect. So even some of our volunteers will be just throwing the food aside, and so my job, Tomasa she can what's the word? She's a witness to that. I'm always like, wait a minute, we can cut that little piece off and compost it and still give that away, or we can talk about how you can use it in a different way, like Claudia does. So that, for me, that is food recovery, on top of, and of course, composting. Composting is amazing, right? There you go.
Well, it's almost the same thing because we work for the same organization. But to me, food recovery is really important because thanks to that, we feed my community once a week. We have food distribution, so yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing. The more food recovery that you do, and you guys probably already know this, the word gets out and people keep calling you, and you get more food coming your way, and it's pretty beautiful.
Thank you all.
How many in the audience, if you could just give some type of indication, are participating in the act of recovering the food in one way or another? Just to get a show of hands. Okay, great.
Yes,
but that's good.
we're all in that system. So I'm going to ask some specifics to a couple, or to each of you differently. But and again, I'm going to kind of go first. Start with Bayside. I know you talked about what food recovery means to you, but what are some of the, and Claudia already very, very, I would say comprehensively explained what you guys do. So you've already answered this question, but what does Bayside, what are some of the challenges and what are some of the solutions that you guys have come up with in the daily? Okay.
Some of the challenges and solutions. So obviously the challenge is people are hungry. Food's really expensive. Organically grown food is really, really expensive. So one of the things we do is we grow food. We obviously can't grow enough to feed 90 people each week, but we grow food. We find other folks who grow it. We work with the local schools as well, and we just try to figure out how to harvest as much as possible. The other thing that we do is we find people who are coming to our food distributions that want to maybe learn how to grow food. So we have a couple programs that teach people how to grow food year-round. We do other things too. Let's see, the question is, what do we do, and how are we implementing solutions? Another thing that we do is we actually recover food from another food distribution. So Mesa College is a partner of ours, and they have a food distribution once a month, I believe. And when they have extra stuff left over, they call us, and we get in our cars, actually Tomasa does, and load that food up. And we're constantly looking for other partners as well. We work with the Linda Vista Farmers Market. Some of the folks that run that farmers market will buy food or buy produce from the farmers at the end of the market because they want to support the farmers, and then they bring that to us to give out. Do you have anything to add to some of the things that we do?
Well, the neighbors, Linda Vista neighbors do.
Yeah.
They donate a lot of their fruit from their trees, and Francis Parker, and Francis Parker School, and
well, the other thing that Tomasa has done it too, there's some neighbors that have land that they wanted us to farm, so she's opened up just a very impromptu sort of community garden space for other families to come and grow food. It's really cool. It's at Advancing Students Forward. You can find Tommy there Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the evening with families. It's a beautiful space. We've also been advocating for community garden space, and we will be breaking ground in the Linda Vista Community Park. So that's a San Diego City park. We're going to be rebuilding the Linda Vista Community Garden. So that's access. one of the other things that Tomi has done is she started a financially, what is the name of that club that you do?
Women Savings Group.
And what do you do?
We gather together once a week and we learn how to save money, and we do crochet, we do all different activities, especially with seniors, because I'm doing it just because of them, because they feel so lonely at home and they want to have a place where they can gather together and do activities. Yeah.
Man, this is amazing. You are already doing all of these things in the community, and being in the community as long as you have, it feels like such a natural, like you know your neighbors, they're growing food for you, you're opening another, you're working with the schools. So it's amazing to hear. Thank you so much. Now the next question is for Imani and Claudia, if you'd like, but I'll start with Imani. So you're already doing many of the things that we're hoping to do, which is, the solidarity rather than the charity. You have the neighbors, they're planting their own, they're growing their own, which is exactly what we want. We don't want this top-down thing. But I wanted to specifically start with Imani and ask, how do we begin that shift from from that food recovery, distribution work, like the charity, to the solidarity?
So I think I have a question for the audience. What does solidarity mean to you all? What does solidarity mean to you?
To me, at least hearing it, it's from wherever you're coming from, being together within the shared space that you have chosen to be in, and standing together from whatever position, whether it be from a position of power, a position of no power, or wherever you do your work, wherever you come from, you coming into the space to hold space together. So that's kind of what solidarity sounds like to me, because it's always solidarity with, standing in solidarity with, outside of the space that I'm always existing in.
So solidarity to me, so moving from charity to solidarity, right? Charity is, I'm helping you. So I have and you have not. And so I'm giving this to Jonathan because I have something. Jonathan doesn't have this folder and I have it, so I'm giving this to him because I'm nice, and it's very I-centered, right? It's about me. And solidarity is about us, which I've heard a lot, heard this echo throughout a lot of your answers. And it's additionally about us recognizing that if Jonathan, it's not going to be this folder, it's something more important than this folder, but if Jonathan doesn't have this folder, then I'm actually not free. I'm actually not well. So it's not about me helping Jonathan, it's about us helping each other, right? And so, when people are saying they're in solidarity with different groups, with different peoples across the world, we've been hearing this a lot, right? With the conversation about what's going on in Palestine and what's happening there, right? I'm in solidarity with these people. And what that to me, when I say that, what that means is that if there are people that are being killed for whatever for inhumane and unjust reasons, I'm okay, I got it. That's actually a threat to my safety, our safety, my community's safety, right? Because we're all one community. So I really love the dilemma that you pointed out, right? Because that will probably happen if you start moving in this situation. You're gonna realize that something you already wrote a grant for, let's be real, and you already have money behind it, you have the budget, and the community is like, we actually don't need any more bell peppers. Like, we don't cook with that, we don't need them. What we really need is cucumbers. We really need cucumbers. It's like really important to our heritage, is what we need right now. And maybe it's even more distant than that. Maybe it's like, in order to do food recovery, first we need to pay rent. We actually have nowhere to live. And y'all are over here talking about all this great stuff about composting, but I actually have nowhere to live right now. And so I want to do that. That's important to me, but right now I'm unhoused and living in public, and I don't want to be. So can we address that issue first? And if you're recognizing that the discrepancy in power between the different people in your community, right? It's not about haves and have-not, it's about our community and different power dynamics, then you're getting creative in finding solutions. So just making it more practical, because I know right now it sounds very pie in the sky, especially if you are a 501c3, and I'm cognizant of that. But how do you build relationships with your funders that are based on more trust? So you can start coming to them and saying, hey, this is actually what the community needs. Like, maybe you should start, doing some funding around this new topic, right? How do you start writing that into your reports as an addendum, right? How do you start getting more funding that has less strings attached, right? And so you can be more flexible, and how do you dedicate more resources to specifically seeking out that type of funding? And then if all that fails, or in addition to all those things, asset mapping. What do other people have? What other resources exist in the community? How can we connect and build bridges between people to meet the needs as we hear them from the community, not as we've already written them in our grant proposals? So was a long-winded way, and I think we all answered together. That's what solidarity means to me. So, thank you. Are you passing it? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think solidarity is encouraging more grassroots movement, is actually having the people on the ground doing the work, supporting their effort, and sometimes even stepping back. Especially for small organizations, having the capacity to receive, and not be overwhelmed. We can't all take all the problems, but we can definitely partner and seek organizations that are doing the work and support them instead of asking for that slice of the pie to fund my organization. I feel that, looking at it as a community as opposed to us siloed into the work that we do, I think looking past the 501c is really important. And again, is having those conversations on what the organizations actually need. Would I like to have a refrigerated van? Of course I would. But I first, in order to ramp and scale up to that, I'd have to have an office building to accommodate the van loads of food. A lot of the grassroots organizations are, just skeleton crews of people that work full-time jobs, that go out in their free time to, pick up donations, do some fundraising, have some, community events, get the word out, do social media. So supporting those organizations in that capacity based on your skill set is always beneficial. If you have a social media voice, amplify it, amplify their efforts. If you know of organizations that have excess produce, gear them towards those community grassroots. The last partnership we were really focused on was Free Shit Collective. They were aiding the border immigrant crisis that was going on with that, and they would show up into our office 3 times a week, sometimes even more, to pick up the resources that we had for them. And one of the struggles that they shared was that a lot of other 501cs were not participating in helping them with the aid. A lot of the funding was stuck at a corporate level, at a lot of advocacy type of 501cs, as opposed to actually getting the food to the people that needed it the most. Some of the catered food and restaurants can have an active role in that they can play, because it definitely makes it easier and facilitates the ability for a lot of the grassroots and mutual aid groups to actually distribute the food if it comes prepared in a chafing dish. Or, we have to think about who we're actually serving. Some of our clients that we work with are homeless, without, unhoused. So they don't have access to refrigeration and they don't have access to kitchens. Some of them do, some of them don't. So we have to modify how we serve people. Some of them have issues with diet, with their stomachs, or, don't have access to dental care or medical care. So they turn down a lot of the food that they can take. So it means nothing for us to say we're giving food away if they can't really utilize it. I can give you a can of chicken noodle soup, but if you don't have an ability to open it, you're not really filling that need. And a lot of the grassroots and mutual aid groups work at that level. They don't have, commercial kitchens. They're actually serving, as they go. So sometimes being mindful of the work that the grassroots organization are doing and some of the limitations they're facing is one way that we can kind of support and show solidarity in that. Sometimes they need cash to go out and buy some of the needs that aren't often donated. When there are police sweeps, they come in and take all the belongings of the unsheltered. So the grassroots organizations go out and have to purchase tents, purchase wagons to put their, their personal belongings in. That's a kind of funding that, one, is really difficult to track the metrics on. And when you're looking from a funder standpoint, you want the numbers, you want the metrics, and also maintaining dignity in the people that we're serving. Let's shift that mindset of we have to see it in person. It's really dehumanizing and humiliating to be in a situation and you have someone taking a picture while they're performing their charity work. To be someone's marketing copy, it's dehumanizing. So maybe shifting that mindset of, am I serving this person where they're at, or am I serving myself? Again, removing ourselves from us instead of them focused. So I think that is what it means to me. I've had different organizations reach out to us and ask us to borrow equipment that we have because they don't have access to it. So that is solidarity. We just kind of have to, rethink that.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. It feels like you have all somewhat answered this next question, but I will put it out there if you have anything else to add, and then we're going to open it up also to the audience just so that you all can let us know what you think this is. But the question is, what does community-centered feeding look like to you? So if you have more to say, I'll hand this to you, or if you want me to just do it to the audience, I'm happy to do that.
I would just say everybody's included. Everybody, no matter who they are, they're included in the solution. Anybody else?
I think community-centered feeding, I think it means that, again, I guess I'm gonna say the same thing, but asking people what they want and need first, right? It really has to start, like, that is really the crux of it, and it's so simple, but our systems make it so hard, and it's like that on purpose. Like, that's what we have to remember. These granting, all this stuff works like this on purpose. It's not an accident that it is difficult to actually meet people where they are and create real solutions and really disrupt the systems that are exploiting our communities. So, but I think really community-centered feeding for me is just really shifting the power, and it's not about what we want or what we think, it's about what the community says they need.
Thank you.
And what they want. It doesn't have to be a need all the time.
I want to touch on that word, need. Many of you that I have met have heard my spiel about need and how need is subjective to where you are in life and what your particular need is in that given moment. Our pantry focuses on a lot of individuals that have food allergies or restrictions of certain foods that they eat. And usually food for, individuals that have certain food allergies is typically more expensive. The demographics right now usually are more to the more affluent as opposed to the low income. And the only reason for that is because of the disparity of individuals that have limited access to medical care to be able to identify even having a food allergy to begin with. And culturally appropriate food. We need to definitely address, again, that's again centered on the people's need as opposed to what we believe we should give. Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Well, first I wanted to actually just challenge. I just feel like in a lot of spaces, over a matter of time, a few terms become really coin terms, key phrases. What does community-centered even mean? Is there a way for us to break that down? In public health, at least, which is my area, that's where we're starting to see differential ways of talking about community-centered, right? Is it community engaged, where you've already decided what you're gonna do and you're having the community participate? Is it community-based, where the community has stated what they want and you are helping and meeting their needs and providing resources? Or is it community-powered, where the community has already began driving solutions? And your role is either to step back, provide, help, consult, all of those ways that you can join in on what the community is already doing. So when we're having this discussion, I think it's important to start thinking about breaking down that term community-centered, because I feel like it's overused, and it's been also used in situations where the community has nothing to do with what you're doing, although they are participating heavily, but you really came up with that idea on your own. So just encouraging that discussion, if at all it feeds into, answering this question.
So, often we talk about how to communicate back to the funders as nonprofits to say, this is really what we need versus what you think, and minimizing the limitations. However, we're not doing, as nonprofits, I think we're not doing that enough. So I want to hear the panel, how would you advise those who find themselves in nonprofits to start the conversation if they're not already having it with funders? Because if it's just a small group of non-funders who are communicating back to, a small group of nonprofits who are communicating back to funders, then the impact is not as grand as it could be if we're all saying, listen, you're missing the mark. This is not helping the grand scheme of things, and this is actually what it should look like.
Yeah, I feel like, Dahlia, I think you're already hinting at it, right? We need to organize. So there is power in organizing, in coming together and taking collective action. There is a person that's kind of already trying to kind of create a collaborative of folks that work at nonprofits on this issue. And I know their personal name, but I don't want to put them out there yet. I can't remember the name of the collaborative, but if you're interested, I will follow up with you once I get that information. But yeah, I would say finding like-minded folks from different organizations that are facing the same issues and approaching the funders together, right? So whether that's, I guess it depends on, this is all about relationships too, right? That's what community organizing comes down to. So it also depends on your relationship with the funder. And so is there a person there that you feel like you built a really good rapport with? And then that determines you could power map this out, but that determines how you approach them, right? With how many people, in what setting, with what type of tone. If it's a large organization and you don't really have any rapport with anyone, but they're doing a lot of harm, or they are missing a really large opportunity and thus doing a lot of harm, that kind of in an indirect way, maybe it is more of these are our demands, and we are a large group of nonprofits. We're calling you out. We're calling you to the table. We're calling you in, but I in a more public space, But I think that, yeah, I think the key is first, like, getting with a group of people, building consensus on, like, what are the main problems, who are your, like, targets, like, who are the funders that you think can do more, and then building a plan from there. That includes, like, a host of different strategies, right?
We had this little map out front, and we were asking individual organizations to put their card or to fill out a little note card and say who they are and if they're interested in connecting. There aren't that many organizations on it, but we've got a few, and that's really exciting. But this note card's another opportunity to do the same thing. So thanks a lot for that. And then now I just kind of want to point your attention to these 3 considerations up here on the board in terms of the conversations you were having today and what we've been talking about through the session. This is, in food recovery and in the food system in general, what systems need to be undone? What harm is it that we're trying to address in the work that we're doing? And what are the power dynamics that really need to shift in order to facilitate the kind of change we need to create the environment that's going to help make everybody successful? And getting back to this question about community-centered, what are the power dynamics that need to shift to really create a community-centered environment? And with that, I want to go back to our amazing panel. So have at it.
Yeah, so I think this is a great, a really important question. So I would say most of them, right? Most of the power dynamics need to shift. But I would say, to give some specific examples, who do we trust as experts on these issues? Who do we cite? And how can we start including and respecting and centering community members as experts, right, on the systems that you are undoing? So, centering, like, if you're a grassroots organization, like, making sure we're centering community members, and also centering the folks that are marginalized, even within whatever given community, the most marginalized, centering those voices. If you're a nonprofit, are you including the voices of community members when you're writing your grant proposals as experts on the problem that you're trying to undo and the solutions that you're creating? We were chatting over there about funding and funders, and I think that's another big power dynamic that needs to shift. And I think we need to hopefully all take on in our different ways the task of re-educating some of these funders on what their role is, calling them to the table for the fact that a lot of the funds that they have because of exploitation of communities and people, and that they need to start holding themselves to a higher standard, and start moving, again, like we were talking about before, from charity towards solidarity. And I think even if you're not a nonprofit that has like funders in the traditional sense, in your community, if y'all are sharing resources, maybe the folks that have some of them have more material resources, making sure that they're not speaking over the folks that have fewer material resources. So it kind of goes back to that first one, who are the experts in really centering the most marginalized.
More collaboration. I think that in order for us to shift that power dynamic that right now exists in San Diego, with a lot of the financial and the funding sources being stuck at some big organizations that hold a lot of power, I think more collaboration amongst nonprofit. We don't have to be competing with each other. We're all doing the same work. Again, solidarity would mean, us shifting, the approach. We don't have to serve all of San Diego. I have Black Women's March that can serve their community. We have Karen over there that can serve the South Bay, Amy, and other parts of our community that serve, and sharing of resources. we need to grow capacity. We need to address logistical issues. We need to address infrastructure. Small organizations don't have the ability to finance a lot of those things. So some of the, CBOs that do have the funding, consider shifting that support and solidarity of the smaller organizations that are doing the actual grassroots work, rethinking utilizing the resources that we do have would be one way for us to address the systematic inequalities that there are.
Oh, so something that came up, which just as we were chatting over on the side, and again, want to jump back in and find out what y'all came up with in your small groups as well. But in this dialogue we were having, we were talking about grants. And when we're writing grants and maybe we're not able to pass money through to another organization without creating a whole other complication with partnerships. But I was just thinking in my mind, my gosh, like couldn't we set up service fees? Like we have to pay service fees to work with certain organizations. Maybe we're paying a service fee so that we can get feedback from the organizations we're providing food to find out what the people that they're serving would like to have for their food. So like they're doing the service they're doing for us is, for instance, if we say, could you in your survey ask a few questions of the clients that you're serving about the food that, so if a survey is going out from a receiving partner that we have, I'll just use Bayside as an example. If we say, hey, Amy, could you please put 2 questions in this survey, and maybe you're doing an informal survey, maybe it's written, I don't know, but would you ask the folks that you're providing food to what type of food they want to see? Do they want to see more citrus? Do they want to see more cilantro? Do they want to see less basil? If we're asking her to ask that question, maybe we provide a service fee to that organization as a way to pay for that service we've asked them to do on our behalf. So it's a way to use that funding in a little bit more creative way that's not necessarily buying wagons. It's about, intellectual property, and it's about the information we're asking that other organization to obtain on our behalf. So again, it's the same structure we're dealing with, but until we can change the nature of the structure, perhaps we just sort of change the way it's operating a little bit. We get a little bit creative, like people often do, outside a nonprofit. So does that cover it? Okay, great. So how about y'all got in your groups and you were talking about some of these different topics. I hope some of you touched on some of these questions, maybe even the power dynamic. Does anyone want to share?
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm not from any organization. I don't work in this industry at all. But it was about 3 years ago that I randomly saw an Instagram ad for the San Diego Food System Alliance, and I contacted them, and I got to know Steve, who was Addison's predecessor, like I think their jobs is just to talk to the public and convince the public to give them money. And it worked, because for a couple of years, my husband and I were donors to the Food System Alliance, which is how I've ended up here today. It's not because I'm working for the Food System Alliance. But one of the things that we were talking about was what Nicole was talking about community-centered and whether it should be community-powered instead. And a lifetime ago, I was volunteering in Tanzania at a school/charity there, and it was set up by 2 women from the UK. And one of the long-term strategies for that particular school was to make it so that it was eventually going to be entirely run by people from Tanzania, so that the people who started this charity, they could leave, and the organization/charity/school could continue doing the work that they had begun, and it would be sustainable, and it would be entirely local and relevant culturally and geographically. And I think that is what community-powered and community-centered should be, because it shouldn't be about the white savior coming in using their own metrics for measuring success and what a community should look like. But it should be about a group of people being empowered and saying, this is our life situation now, but we don't want it to be like this. This is what we need for this to change. And if we look, I'm just skipping ahead to that last point, which we didn't discuss, but what systems need to be undone? I think a bigger thing, which I think is beyond this particular session, but it's not what systems need to be undone. It's the entire system. It's the entire food system with big food and big agriculture and the power that they all have, which is massive. And it's a fundamental change in American society, because it's a little bit capitalistic right now, because everything is about quarterly profit statements and about convincing people to eat more ultra-processed foods, because that is what makes money, and this is what shareholders want at every quarterly what are they called? The profit call things. My husband would know, he works kind of there. But this is what the system is right now, and that is what needs to change, not just for people, but for the earth and for animals and for all sorts of things. And I admire what we're doing at a grassroots level, or not we, I'm not doing any of this, but I admire what all of these organizations are doing at a grassroots level to, change the world, because you need individual people to make these changes, but also from a much bigger system point of view, it's like, where do we even begin? It's with policy, and it's with a change in philosophy and a change in mindset, and not so much what can I and my family do to make our lives better, but what do we all need to do to make the world a bit better? Because if everybody has a better world to live in, we all benefit. And also, I'm from Australia, which we have public healthcare, and we have a public education system, and moving to America 7 years ago was a little bit of a shock, because I didn't realize quite how individualistic it was here and how capitalistic it was. But learning that, congressmen are heavily influenced by lobbyists from the food industry, and that the FDA is also severely underfunded and understaffed and also influenced by the food industry. It's like, oh, this is a bit depressing. What do we do to make a difference? And I guess that's what all of you here are doing. Small grassroots things.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. It works now.
I think in reading the Food Vision 2030, I think I was happy to see so much of like the county supervisors and so much of, government involved, and I don't know to the extent that they, whether it was like funding, just a check, or, like actual involvement, but because I think part of the thing that has come up actually in another conversation, in another session, was the metrics and funding in relation to metrics when it comes to different organizations, right? And, I think especially when it comes to our elected officials, it's like they want to know, how many people did you serve, right? And the higher the number, most likely the more money you're going to get. And, and obviously other demographics that come into that as well. And so, I don't think that this is a fight that any one of us can do on our own, and that's not fair for us to do, but like through community voice like this group and through the Food Vision 2030 is how do we shift that when it comes to working with our, with our infrastructure, with our elected officials who do have some power up, right? And because things do need to change at the state and national, federal level, but so it needs to start somewhere, and our voice needs to be elevated somehow. And so, the one positive I saw was that there was a lot of government support for the Food Vision. And so how do we make sure that that is productive?
I have to hold myself accountable for being complicit. That's it. Like, I was just having the conversation about things. I'm like, man, like sometimes I've placed myself in my own bubble, and I've had to kick myself out of it. So it's, we hold each other accountable, we have honest conversations with ourselves, and then we challenge our government, we challenge our legislators and all those officials up there. We gotta do it, because otherwise, it's our voice, right? I don't wanna get real philosophical, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
Going off of both points, I just see a room and a panel filled with women. And I think, I don't know, I just keep thinking like we're pushing up, and so how do we organize to get people like us in this room where it's not someone so different and distinctly different in vision, you know what I mean? Like they're talking about numbers, and we're talking about community and like real change, real effect. And so I guess I don't know the answer, but but the question is to not just maybe collaborate to push upward, but to collaborate to uplift people into those positions of power and really like block people who do not resonate with our community vision. And that's that one right there.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Other thoughts? I mean, lots of thoughts. Any verbal expressions? I really loved in the session this morning, Wes and Aaron and Byron, the connectivity there. You know, same concept. Nita brought it up at the beginning about output versus outcomes. I mean, obviously we need to talk about outcomes, but they're not always neat and tidy. And sometimes, you know, we need discretion, and sometimes we need to respect people's privacy and offer a sense of dignity. You know, you don't necessarily count people when you need to be looking them in the eye and shaking their hand. So, you know, we have some work ahead of us in terms of that. And it sounds like if we're going to, you know, create some kind of block and block power, that's going to take some work too.
There was one other thing I wanted to, someone shared this with me at a conference I was at that resonated so much, and it was such a brilliant idea. So when we're talking about like how do we communicate some of these things that we need or that we want to change with funders, the conversation was about connecting with funders. Like, gosh, they never email me back, they never call me back, like I just can't get through to this foundation. Most foundations have budgets for their staff to go to conferences like this. So if you're trying to connect with the funder, if you're trying to communicate things like what we're saying here about change, another way to do that is to not necessarily just email them saying like, can we have a phone call? You're going to this conference and it aligns with something that there is in their focus area, invite them to the conference. Or even just send them, say, this aligns with one of your focus areas and I thought you might find it interesting. Because chances are they have the budget, not necessarily to fly out or to come down to see just you and have that conversation, because they know you're gonna ask for money, but to come to that conference. And that's how you can connect with them, and that's how they can hear these collective voices that are talking about, hey, we need to shift this focus because this is not what the community needs. So I haven't done it yet, working on it, but I was inspired by it. All right.
I have a question for, it looks like most of us are in the food recovery business. With the passage of SB 1383, requirements for reporting for increasing food donations, diversion for food sustainability, you know, environmental impact, there's a lot of that that's coming down the pipeline. How many of us are ready for that? We don't have, San Diego is not equipped for that. We don't have the logistics, the infrastructure, the funding to support all the organizations. What are we going to do come January 1st, 2024, or when we actually have to start reporting? We need to come together collectively and actually start having the donors have some grit in the game to support those recovery efforts, as well as, you know, speak to our representatives, our elected officials, and having them, you know, support the grassroots efforts that we're trying to achieve here. But, you know, maybe expanding on partnerships. How many of us are, you know, making an effort to reach out to other organizations and offering our support or some of the services that we already have in place, you know, especially for capacity building on that. What is, you know, SB 1383 gonna look for us? And how are we gonna, you know, handle that when we're already doing it, but we have to do it more.
Just in case a person here does not know what SB 1383 is, I just want a brief recap. It is a law that was passed several years ago, but is going to be implemented. It's slowly being implemented, and it will in January become very implemented. And it requires all of California to reduce food waste by 50% by the year 2030. And what that means is that every city in California is required to come up with a plan, be able to do this act without any funding from the state, by the way. So they are all on their own trying to figure it out. It's a pretty big mess, honestly, but they're trying to get it together because every city is now going to be required to adhere to these mandates. So what we're talking about here is the very first phase of it, and these big generators are the ones that are now going to be identified.
And there's also another piece of that mandate is that 20% of that excess that's being diverted from landfill is going to feed people. So essentially that's an influx of 20% from the 40% that's been being wasted. So it you know, creates a lot of challenges.
Before we close, can we give a big round of applause to our incredible panel?